Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting their roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Paranormal Experience with Kat Hobson. I am your host, and I am so very glad that y'all are here. I have what has already started out to be one of the most interesting shows of the season. I am just really excited to be able to get this show off because every so often, as y'all know, when we are talking about incidents of high strangeness or things that might have one of our friends, the Men in Black, show up. And if I advertise it, and I did advertise this one for 2 weeks, things happen. And that's why if I'm doing a UFO show or something of that nature, you won't see about it generally until like the Friday before or something. So tonight I have Steve Edmiston and I have Scott Schaefer. They are both excellent professionals. They are pretty much above reproach. I didn't say they weren't reprobates. I just said they weren't above reproach. But I'm kidding. They're wonderful men and very patient as well because we have been fighting dragons here. And, their expertise is the Maury Island Incident, and which is spelled wrong in chat. But if you are not familiar with that, you're going to be. It is actually just a bit older than Kenneth Arnold's reports, and he is credited with the first UFO sightings and gained a lot of notoriety with that, as a matter of fact. And I think that this is going to be something that you're really, really going to enjoy. Now, Steve is actually an attorney and author. He is someone who completely filled in the blanks on my education relevant to Maury Island. I was aware of it. I did not realize that it was pre-Kenneth Arnold by a few days, a couple of weeks. I did not realize the repercussions that came as a result of this event. And, excuse me, Scott Schaefer has done a documentary on this. Now, you may know him from his work with Bill Nye the Science Guy and other really great productions. But he did a film on this, and it's something that I think that you're going to really enjoy. I'm looking forward to this, and trust me, if it took me another hour and they were patient enough, we were going to get this show going. So we are here, and Steve and Scott, I'm so glad that y'all are here too. And I want to say hey to Lori in chat. And if you're listening, it is, the link is on fatemag.com, radio, /radio, Fate Radio. You'll find it. Just go to fatemag.com and you can get to us. You'll also be able to see chat, but you'll have to log into Spreaker to join chat. So I'm just thrilled. I have been looking forward to this, and Steve and Scott, thank you.
Well, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here, and you're so gracious. You keep apologizing for glitches and things, and you know, we have all done that. We've been on your end where we're producing, and it happens. So certainly no worries here, and I appreciate your audience and you, Kat, for hanging in there with us. We're glad to be here. This is fun. This is a fun story to talk about. We're gonna have fun tonight.
I think so. I'm thrilled. So
I think we're thrilled too. We love sharing this story. We've taken quite the deep dive into it, and so hopefully we'll all somehow be enlightened and better off after we're done babbling.
Well, babble is what I do best. It's my second language. So, but right after Southernese. But I am really fascinated by this because, to be honest, I am a relative newcomer to ufology. I kind of hit the ground running. My first conference was the Ozark Mountain UFO Fest conference in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It was an eye-opening experience for me. I did not realize that there was such a huge draw to this subject because there's so many experiencers. And I started listening to researchers. I had become friends with Stanton Friedman, and that's where we actually got to meet face to face and have a discussion, and just I got to enjoy getting to know him more. That man was a really good researcher. There's just so many different things that I did not realize fed into a lot of this. I was shocked. And most all of the strangeness occurred all at one time with Maury Island over the years. How did y'all get attracted to this?
Well, Scott, should I jump in first? Then you chip in?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell your story.
Well, first of all, thanks for that question. I love to explain why I got involved because I still try to explain that to my spouse.
Sure. I'm sure. I mean, it's very strange.
So to give, you mentioned I'm an attorney. So I've been an attorney for 30 plus years, and I do business and intellectual property and entertainment law, and I'm not a ufologist. I was not involved in this field, until one day literally how I got involved at a coffee shop. This origin story, like Marvel Comics. This is my origin story. How I'm at a coffee shop with a neighbor, and we're talking about something, and we're talking about this piece of local history. And a guy that I don't know leans in and says, well, if you think that's good history, you must know about the Maury Island Incident, because where this coffee shop is and where I live is looking across Puget Sound at Maury Island. So I live like a mile from Maury Island, and I look at it every day. That's my view. It's a beautiful view. It's wonderful.
Are you on the other island?
No, we're on the mainland. So
okay.
we're not on, so there's Vashon Maury connected, but we look right at both of them.
Okay.
And so this guy says, so we're talking about this local history. And so he's like, you must know this story. And he's like, yeah, flying saucers in the 1950s. And I had never heard of it. I've lived here for 20 years. I'd never heard this story that apparently happened right off my shore. Right. So, honestly, in the coffee shop that day, my neighbor and I were kind of like, hey, thanks, pal, interrupting our conversation with a UFO story, and we weren't rude, but it was sort of like we didn't know what to do with that, right? So, but I came home and I got on the Google and did a little research, and I'm seeing this, Wikipedia entry, and I'm like, are you kidding me? This is this is a really interesting story. And so I start kind of peeling, getting into the notion, probably from the angle of how did I not know this? How could I live here where it happened and not know the story? And none of my neighbors knew the story. Nobody knew the story. So kind of got excited. And in our neighborhood, because we have a nice community kind of plaza that we do shared activities on, my neighbor and I, our habit is to find something like that, and it's an excuse for a party. And so we decided we were going to launch the Maury Island Incident Historical Society and hold a party, so that we could inform all of our neighbors of this piece of history, this flying saucer sighting from 1947, and share it with them. And so I had to research it all, and we did a lot of storytelling at the party, and we created a flying saucer, and we burned it, kind of like Burning Man. It was a super fun party, and Scott Schaefer was at this party, right? And Scott Schaefer, who is a Directors Guild of America director, in addition to what you mentioned, working with Bill Nye and Penn and Teller, and you were in the writer's room for Arsenio Hall. I mean, you've got this Hollywood background. You'd moved here up, and you were like, you come up to me and you say, what did you say? You told me what we should do.
Well, first off, this was a magical moment. Steve invited me to his party. As a journalist, I was going to cover it I do a bunch of local online newspapers for an area south of Seattle, including Des Moines, where Steve lives. And so came to his party. Steve is a great speaker. He did a whole presentation on Maury Island, telling the whole story. And I walked up to him afterwards and said, you just did one of the best film pitches I've ever heard. And I had background. I'm not a ufologist, but I almost became one. In the early 90s, I worked as a field director on a syndicated TV show called Sightings. It was like a weekly
I remember that show.
Entertainment Tonight for UFOs and other phenomena. And so I was a field director on it. I took it kind of as a lark. It was a Directors Guild job, so it paid well. And I thought, well, at the very least, I'll make a decent wage and go out and meet some nut jobs covering UFO stories. And so I was kind of a skeptic. I was certainly more open-minded, I think. But I really became open-minded when I took the job. And one of my first gigs was a cattle mutilation story in Alabama. And
what part of Alabama?
I think the southeast. I don't remember the cities, but I interviewed.
I live in Alabama, so I'm nosy.
Oh, well, it might. You're in Birmingham, or where are you at?
I am in Birmingham.
It might have been in that area. So this would have been about 91 or 92. And so I went down there and interviewed about 5 different ranchers in, I think it was a 3-county area. I was there for a week, and we shot, these interviews. And the interesting thing about it was there is a tie to Men in Black in this story.
Really?
So I interviewed the ranchers. They didn't know that they were part of a group of people. They didn't know the other ranchers. They were all unrelated, but they all had similar stories about their cattle found mutilated and the wounds. And we had photos. We even talked to the state veterinarian who couldn't explain what happened. But the most interesting thing to me was I would ask them, well, has anything else happened around the time that the mutilations occurred? And they said, yeah, there's these silent black helicopters. And I have, these really high-powered binoculars. And I remember looking at one and wondering who is flying this? And there were men in black suits as the pilots.
Plain
and these was
suits?
5 different. No, in black suits. They were men in black.
But not military. Wow.
No, they were not military suits. So they all said they saw men in black in silent black helicopters, all independent. And I remember calling my wife. This is a famous family story now. Teresa, I'm in Alabama. This stuff is real. I can't believe it. And so I went down a rabbit hole that was at times dangerous.
Wow.
Anyway, so Steve did his Maury Island Incident presentation. I said, we should talk about doing this as a film. And so we started, casually meeting over coffee for about the next 3 to 6 months. And we said, hey, let's just pitch it as a film. Nobody's done the Maury Island Incident film yet. So we found an angel investor, a guy named John White, and we got funding, we got producers, we used great local Seattle-based actors and crew, and that was over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And here we are now.
Yeah, we were shooting. I think we were shooting the film 10 years ago, actually. Yeah. So that's how we kind of got involved and actually got involved working together. It's always been for me, my second career, in addition to being a lawyer, is a screenwriter. You said I was an author, but really I'm a screenwriter, and I've made a number of feature films as a writer and a producer, and certainly a number of shorts. And the more I learned about the story, the more it felt like a film, just felt like this was, cinema heaven. And the more I got into the story, the more human it was. And these are things that attracted me, because like I said, I wasn't a UFO, aficionado. I love history. I love Cold War. I love, secrecy and those kind of things that, those are really the best movies to me. And this was just replete with that. So, we were just really excited to do it, and it came together pretty quickly, and we were able to make the film. And if we're ready, I will tell your viewers the story. Should we do that? Should we?
Well, because I am. Let's go ahead and take our first break, because we are about 2 minutes out from that. But
okay.
I am so into this because I was, I've heard Ken Arnold forever and ever, and something that fascinated me about this experience, and Scott, for what you were sharing about Alabama too, is that I know a man in black. I know a man who was a man in black in the Gulf Breeze, Florida incident. And he's retired military. He's come forward. He doesn't care. I mean, if you just knew the personality, you would know why he doesn't care. Couldn't be bothered. They'll get over it,
Well, about a small world, Kat. I wanted to just quickly chime in. I went to Gulf Breeze for sightings to do a story about those sightings. So
did you really? Oh my gosh!
Yes, that was another one of them.
Did you talk to the gentleman who was the man in black there, by chance?
Well, I don't remember him as a man in black. I talked to some military people and witnesses, and I believed that they saw something.
Well, that's fascinating, because that's one of my favorite.
Yes.
Because I have a house in Gulf Shores, and that's my area. That is where I like to be. So I can't wait for this conversation to proceed further. So let's go ahead and take this break, and we will get right back on it. And you know what? This is so great. everyone listening live, thank you so much for your patience to be able to be there. And if you're listening to this in podcast format, thank you for that too. We appreciate you. And we'll be right back. Y'all come back too.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watched a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step, after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page, is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of, a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I'm Kat Hobson, your host. And man, if you missed that first segment, oh my gosh. Don't worry, though, because you can pick us up anywhere that you get your streaming. We're iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. I will say that we have a huge fan base in India, thanks to Geo Savan, so thank y'all very much for that. It does make me go and look at all these friend requests I get differently. It's just a thrill. But I am here tonight with some of the most interesting men, and I know that y'all are enjoying them also. Scott Schaefer and Steve Edmiston, and we are talking about the Maury Island Incident, the first, ahead of Kenneth Arnold by just a little bit, reporting of UFOs or discs anyway. So I had to interrupt you, and I'm so glad that you are here. Steve, did you want to pick up where we had left off with going into the explanation?
Sure. I think we had a great cliffhanger in the first segment where we were just saying, okay, now we're going to tell you the story. So
but first,
let's do the story. Let's do the story. So when Scott and I do a lot of public speaking about this in the Northwest, and typically we kind of tell the story of the Maury Island Incident in two parts, day one and day two. And then there's a lot of contextualizing that happens over the summer of the saucers in 1947. So the basic story in Maury Island is it's June 21, 1947. So you have to remember in June of 1947, and the history is what really attracts me. In June of 1947, we're just 2 years out of World War II, right? And the country is sort of figuring out, what we're going to do next, and sort of really grappling with, wait a minute, we're a world power, right? We've come out victorious, and all of a sudden the United States is sort of top of the pyramid. And but we have a problem, and that problem is we've already identified we have this new enemy, and that enemy is the Soviet Union. And President Truman has in May of 1947 has had this big speech where he said the containment doctrine is our new policy. We're going to stop the Soviets from going anywhere from where they already are. They're the new enemy. So we had this tension that had been created just 2 years after the war ended, because we have this new enemy, and people are sort of, what does it mean to have a new enemy? And that's sort of the backstory to this story. So on June 21, 1947, a man named Harold Dahl, who lived in Tacoma, Washington, which is, if you're not familiar with our geography, it's 40 miles, give or take, south of Seattle. So you got Seattle, and you go south about 40 miles, and you're in Tacoma. And all of it's connected by this giant body of water, Puget Sound. And Puget Sound has islands, right? So on June 21, 1947, Harold Dahl gets in his boat called the North Queen. It's a 50-footer. It's a big old pre-World War II, big old boat, big old working boat. And he brings his son, Charles, and they hire 2 day workers off the docks in Tacoma to help them for that day. We don't know who they are. There's no record of names, anything like that, of the 2 men that joined them. So we have four crew on the boat. They bring the family dog on the boat. Dog's name is Sparky. We know that. And then they get in the boat and they go out on the Sound. They go about 3 miles north until they're just off Maury Island. And Maury Island and Vashon Island are connected now, but at that time, they were still identified separately. So they're just off of Maury Island, and the allegation is that all of a sudden they look in the sky and there are 6 flying discs above them, and they're fairly high. One is lower. They are hollow in the middle, so they're kind of like that donut shaped craft, as opposed to a solid circle craft. Clearly, all the description is hollow in the middle, and the first sort of significant detail that in Harold's story is that one of them seemed to be lower than the others and seemed to be failing. It was having trouble. It was erratic and different. And as they watched this right above their boat, they all of a sudden that craft starts dropping like a chaff. They called it chaff, which I always think of like if you're at a bonfire and someone's throwing newspaper in and you get that newspapery ash, like that was falling off of this craft. And that isn't particularly upsetting. I mean, it's a wild thing to see until there's an explosion. And that lower craft that's dropping chaff, all of a sudden there's an explosion. And now we get like this molten material, which today we see in all the reporting on it, they called it slag. So like a molten material slag. And now that changed everything. And when Scott and I were making the film, we had a lot of discussions. What would it take? How scared did you have to be to take a 50-foot working boat and run it aground so you could escape the things falling on you? That's where I said this scene, this is Saving Private Ryan. This is they are life and death. They do not want to stay on the water because of the slag falling on them. The slag actually hit the son Charles, according to the allegation, and burned his arm. Yep. So there's a burn on Charles' arm. Hit the dog Sparky and killed Sparky. Sparky died as a result of what happened. They jump off the boat when it's on shore. And at that time, there were these kind of high bluffs on Maury Island, and they hid beneath these sort of bluffs and cliffs as this rain of fires coming down. And they waited until that stopped, and then the flying discs went away. Were
the discs there while this was coming apart?
Yeah, so you had the 6 flying discs. One seems to be failing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't crash. In fact, the allegation is that one of the other discs came down and touched it. That's in the reporting, and all of a sudden that seemed to cure it or help it or whatever, and then they all left, and once they were gone, the sighting's over. According to Harold's account, they all kind of agreed, this is so strange. We're not going to tell anybody. We don't know what to tell anybody. The boat had been damaged, and they had to come up with, well, what are they going to say? But to get back on the boat, they actually dropped Sparky in the Sound. Charles, the son, is so upset. They just, at the sight of the dead dog, that they essentially bury the dog at sea, and they go back to Tacoma. And some people will ask, why were they even out there? And what they were doing is they scavenged logs off Puget Sound. And kind of like if you're familiar with finding stray cattle, in Puget Sound, the log booms would come up and down, and people would get paid to return logs to the timber company. Okay. So they're out there. That's why they had a giant boat. And they're out there doing the boat. Yeah.
Because that's a big boat to have out, just not be making.
Yeah, they weren't pleasure. It wasn't pleasure craft. It was a working boat, a very large working boat. So that's day one. That's sort of June 21, 1947, Maury Island Incident. But the second part, which really intrigues me, is the second day, which is the next morning, June 22nd, 1947. Harold Dahl is woken up at his house in Tacoma by someone who's come to the door very early in the morning. And Harold, in his accounts, describes this as what we now know as the quintessential Man in Black. Literally, the description is, it's a black suit, it's a white shirt, it's a black tie, the fedora, arrived in a 1947 black Buick, and comes to the door and, tells Harold early in the morning that I know what happened to you on the water yesterday. And we should talk about that. We have to talk about that.
We do have to talk about that because, the fact that, somebody showed up like that, there was no precedent for that. This was not something that was a common occurrence that happened that you could expect the government to come and check you out. This was the first time.
We are so used to things like the internet and social media and everybody taking a picture of something. Right. If something happened to you out on Puget Sound off Maury Island in 1947, the assumption is you saw it and nobody else did. Exactly. It was remote. In the land side, if you go across like where we live now, the entire population in this whole rural area was not quite 3,000 people. This was not this was not a population center. So, if they're out on Puget Sound and they see this thing, the assumption would be we're the only ones that saw it. So if someone shows up at your house the next day and says, I saw everything, and then says we should go somewhere else to talk about it unless you really want to talk about it in front of your family. And Harold hadn't told anybody. He had, and we'll get back to Charles' burned arm in a minute, but so they go to a diner in Tacoma, Washington. And in that diner, the Man in Black, who never identifies himself by name, recounts to Harold all the details. So it's not just you saw something, but it's the detailed relaying of the things that he saw the day before. And then does what we now, and this is where I got into my rabbit hole of research, what we now kind of associate with Men in Black, which is delivered the warning. Right. That's almost like the mission of the,
it is the mission.
You saw something. I'm telling you, I know what you saw, and you shouldn't tell anybody what you saw, or bad things will happen to you, your family. Obviously, I know where you live. I came to your house. So that is the first. Now, here's what's really great, from a story standpoint. June 21, 1947. First sighting in the summer of the saucers. First sighting in the modern UFO era, right? So this is before Ken Arnold's sighting that was on June 24th.
Yep.
It's 2 weeks before Roswell, right, on July 8th. And so that sighting, true or not, whatever, and we'll talk about that. First, that's the first one. On the second day, June 22nd, I assure you, this is the first time anyone ever said they'd been approached by a man in black. First time ever. So even if Harold Dahl was the greatest fictional storyteller in the world, he told a story that's now everything we think of as the Men in Black. That's his legacy. This story, or this truth, is what, if we want to talk about the franchise Men in Black with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, or we want to talk about the X-Files, that's the legacy of this story.
Yes,
that's where it started. Yeah. And to me, as a writer and a historian, and as generally a skeptic lawyer, I'm hooked. There is no way this isn't interesting. And then my pitch when I talk about this publicly, I said, but none of this is the weird part. That's all coming up. That's all. The great part of this story is still to come. That's just you can pass the test. Like if you hung up now and we have a test tomorrow, you could say, I know about the Maury Island incident because I know what happened on day one. I know what happened on day two. None of that is the good stuff. The good stuff's coming up.
It gets so much weirder.
Yes, it does.
And, I know we're going out with a cliffhanger, but we can't go out yet.
Okay, well, you tell me when we have to go.
No, but, the thing that I find the most strange about this is that this guy, they're in the middle of the sound. There is obviously nothing else around there because they would have also been in distress. Mm-hmm. And you've got, because I live in Birmingham where we had Sloss furnaces. Slag is molten metal that is just dripping. It is liquid. Yep. And to have what they call, because that's what it was then. It's the same era. So if you have slag dripping out of the sky, that's a horrible burn that Charles had. Yep. That is a horrible death for Sparky. That is, because you're not having debris, like a debris cloud coming down on you. This is probably, it could either have been fuel, mistaken for metal, or it was liquefied metal, which is hot. And, they would have known if there was somebody there. They would have been trying to help or get help. So there wasn't anybody that they could see observing the same incident. That's what makes the whole Men in Black thing have the ultimate creep factor. How did they know?
There's Scott and I really, when we make a movie, when we make a narrative film, with actors and retelling a story, you have to fill in the blanks, right? You nobody knows what was said on that boat. Nobody knows, those things. You've got to, as a writer, you got to fill it in. As a director, sure. Scott's got to fill it in. And we felt, you said it right. I don't think we ever said it that succinctly. The creep factor. And when you just sort of read it on Wikipedia or something, you don't get that. But when you really think about it, it's almost a horror film if someone comes to your house the next day after your horrible event. Yes. And we felt like that was critical to share, and that moment had to be real in the movie when we made the movie. Yeah,
I mean, holy cow! But I've read Graham Parker's book, thinking that it was another friend's, and when I actually got into it and realized this was Graham talking about his own experiences, I thought, holy wow, I can't believe this. So when I ran across my friend whose book I thought it was, I bought the wrong book. So it was just like 30 years earlier. But, it was so astounding that this had happened, right? that this was a normal thing and that anyone who was involved in this research was going to be going through this experience, because it became not uncommon. I mean, even now, with things that happen of this nature, if you're not reporting it somewhere, you're still going to get a visit. You still get visits. And if you do report it, it's, or if it's happening, I still don't know how they find you. I still don't know how they know who is being affected by these happenings. And that's probably like way over a $64,000 question.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's a big deal.
I think Scott and I assume we have several FBI files on us at this point, even though we're just like telling a story.
I say keep it coming to me.
Yeah.
I hope I'm filling the file up. I'm working on it. I'm trying to make you guys proud, give you something to do.
I'm proud. And I'll tell you what, I have kidded around with friends often. I mean, like when I told y'all before we started, and I said, this does not happen if I'm talking about ghosts, right? It doesn't. The ridiculous situations that we had trying to use something that was a landline computer. I mean, we weren't going to get this show out had I not, made a quick change. And that's not the first time that's happened discussing this topic. That really does not happen when I'm having a ghost show. So
interesting.
I find
it's
it
the
so.
Creep factor.
It's the creep factor.
Well, look, we're talking about the government, and we're going to get to that part of the story. We're going to get to the part where we're talking about the government's investigation of this story and what they did with that investigation. And I think that's where you start wondering, how excited is the government that we're digging up all the old bones?
Well, I tell you, I'm sure that y'all get a lot more attention than I do, but it's ridiculous what happens here, and more ridiculous on a cell phone when you can hear somebody that's a third party to your phone call. That, I don't know if you guys have had that happen or not, but I have. And it's one of my girlfriends has had somebody, chuckle when she said something about them being there. I was just like, oh, don't tell me that, because I would have to go find them, But with that being said, let's go ahead and knock this break out, and we will be right back. And for all of you listening, man, don't touch that dial. I'm going to quote Mark Fultz on that, because this is some good stuff, and it's just going to get creepier and weirder and way more interesting, even if you can believe it. But we'll be right back. Y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I'm Kat Hobson, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. I am having the best time because for those of you who know me, you know that I started as a paranormal investigator. I started getting into other anomalous experiences and ufology. Ufology is my love because you know what? It's not subjective. There's evidence of this. There is real life evidence of this. And I just think it's so much fun. And that may be a weird way to look at it. I choose not to think so. So, I mean, because when you have credible witnesses, you have people who, police officers, you have medical personnel, you have attorneys who do the research, you have people who are seeing this on a daily basis. For God's sakes, we had, UFOs around the dome of the Capitol. We had over the White House. Everybody saw that. Jets were scrambled. Nothing was brought down. I mean, this stuff is real. And this is where it started. From the actual reporting of seeing saucers to the first Man in Black incident, which is still happening today. You guys are really some of my favorite people to talk to right now. I love this, and I'm actually going to Contact in the Desert, which is an experiencer and science and disclosure and everything conference that is really cool. And
we're gonna hire you as our agent, and you just make sure we end up on those panels next year.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't see why you wouldn't. This is something that's way. I mean, I think that because Kenneth Arnold reached out to publicize his experience, he tried to publicize and make bank on it. Okay, and there's nothing wrong really with that, but because of how he approached his experience, this one tended to be brushed aside, and this was more intense. This was something that resulted in injury, death, destruction of property, and the government feeling that they had to intervene. So Kenneth Arnold did not really get that intervention level off the bat.
We will... Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I was going to say, and to me, one of the more interesting aspects of this, and Steve will explain this, but it was the first casualty for the newly independent Air Force.
Yes.
So, and it still hasn't really been acknowledged, I don't think, by the government. I mean, there should be a memorial. There should be.
Yes.
Well, it got blown off because UFOs were involved. That's why.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, no, actually, it is why. They don't want to have that. So, if you want, I'll pick up. What are we on? Part 2 of the segment. So So we all now know. Your audience knows if they've been with us. We know what happened on June 21 and June 22, and then we also know that Ken Arnold on June 24, just 3 days later, he sees 9 objects at Mount Rainier. And he's a pilot, and he's credible. And all of a sudden, he becomes kind of this celebrity in 1947, because in 1947, Roswell's 2.5 weeks later. What's happening around the globe is sightings.
Yes.
And I mean, not just hundreds, but even thousands of sightings. And they're in the newspapers. And this is an easy research for your readers if they want to dive into 1947. It's just everywhere. And it's now got this name, or the press gave it the name at the time, the Summer of the Saucers.
Yes.
So that was a thing happening, and there were really two kind of things going on. One was probably a lot of people, now you'd say you're a social media influencer, you want to be famous. Back then, with only a newspaper, there are probably a lot of people who thought, I can tell a story and get in a newspaper, and yay. And so there's that aspect. But back to my first point, at this time in 1947, the government took it seriously.
Yes, very seriously.
That people were seeing things. And we can look back today and go, oh, it was crazy. But what was happening, this was 1947. The Soviet was our new enemy. And the government, and I'm talking about the Army, Air Force, the Army, the FBI with J. Edgar Hoover, the newly formed CIA. What they were worried about is our new enemy able to fly over our country? And are people actually seeing things? And they're very nervous if this is a technology that the Soviets might have. So instead of, in a sense, dismissing these sightings, the government went full tilt to investigate them. Imagine that. And so when all this stuff is happening, there are two confluences happening. One is Ken Arnold, the Mount Rainier pilot that sees 9. He becomes famous. He's a celebrity. He's someone that people are looking up to as credible for a witness. And he gets hired by a Fate magazine.
Yeah, hello.
Fate.
Well, but now it wasn't Fate at the time, but it was.
Oh, right, that's right.
Palmer.
Ray Palmer.
Yes.
And so this is right before Fate comes out in 1948. So Ray Palmer hires, and so Ray Palmer hires Ken Arnold to be kind of his celebrity author. And one of the assignments he gives to Ken Arnold is the Maury Island story. Right? So those two separate things are now together.
Yes.
At the same time, the government is going through the list of things to investigate, and it also chooses to investigate the Maury Island story. Yes. And it assigns two literal veterans from World War II, pilots, Captain William Davidson and Lieutenant Frank Brown, and they're assigned to fly to Tacoma, Washington, to interview Harold Dahl and Fred Chrisman, and to figure out what was going on at Maury Island. And I always have a joke when I do public talks is, they got into the Uber of 1947, which was a B-25 bomber.
Yes.
All this surplus military equipment is around, and these pilots literally get on a plane, a B-25, fly themselves up in a B-25 bomber in peacetime to McChord Air Force Base in Tacoma so that they can meet Harold Dahl and Fred Chrisman, who was a business partner of Harold Dahl's.
Yes.
At a place called the Winthrop Hotel. And they connect with Ken Arnold. So now they're all together. So there's Ken Arnold and the two Air Force officers. And they even connect with a United Airlines pilot named E.J. Smith, who had also had a sighting. So it's like all these investigators are all going to get together with the Maury Island witnesses at the Winthrop Hotel, which sounds very exciting. It sounds like a movie scene, right? You can't make this stuff up. So they all get together, and at the Winthrop Hotel, by the time they call them the interrogations are over, Harold Dahl makes clear that bad things have happened to him, and he wants to forget everything. He wants to make it all go away. So it's been since June to the end of July, and his business was vandalized. His wife became ill. His son mysteriously went missing and was found in Lusk, Wyoming, with no memory of how he got there. I mean, just bad things. Man in Black says bad things will happen if you talk. Harold talked, bad things happened. So Harold wants to make it all go away. His partner, Fred Chrisman, and the others are kind of happy to talk about it. And they even bring samples of the slag to give to the Air Force officers at the hotel as part of the investigation. The Air Force
cornflakes box. Don't forget that.
Yeah,
part.
It's actually in a corn. It's like the details here are crazy. In a cornflekes box. Yeah. So they give that to
cardboard was probably more substantial then. So
and even the hotel is wild. The story of
Wiretapping.
Ken Arnold is that
Yes.
he shows up. He hadn't made a reservation, but when he showed up, they had a reservation.
Yeah.
When they do these interviews, all these calls are coming from anonymous people, and the story's getting out. So it's like people are listening in. Somehow people are listening to what's happening. Reporters are asking questions based on what obviously they must have heard in the meetings. It's really crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an incident where like their lunch order was, they were talked about what they wanted for lunch, and then their lunch order showed up?
It was like, that
things
is a
like
great
that.
example of that whole experience. It was hard in the recounting to do anything other than to assume they're being watched.
Yeah.
And things are
Yes.
happening, and it's just odd.
And
Everybody's
it was
screaming.
And Ken Arnold details a lot of that in his Coming of the Saucers book, which I
Yes.
believe was just re-released. There's a new version out.
You gotta
So,
love the new one.
so
The new cover.
Harold Dahl, our primary witness, our hero, if you will, the centerpiece of this sighting, at this meeting, by this time at this meeting, he's like, I want to make it go away. And he starts to say this, and this is important. He starts to tell people, the interviewers, the intel officers, if I get grilled on this, I'm going to just start saying I made it up. Now, he doesn't say I made it up.
Yes.
He doesn't say I invented this. He says, if, and this is important, repeatedly, if I'm challenged, if this doesn't go away, I'm going to invent a new story. And the story I'm going to invent is that it's a hoax.
Yeah.
And that's how he always phrases it, is that if I'm challenged, I'm going to now tell this new story. So anyway, meeting ends. It's July 31st, 1947, rolling into August 1st, 1947. The two Air Force officers, Davidson and Brown, they take the slag, the sample, and they go to the airfield, the military base, McCord Airfield in Tacoma. And you're like, why did they get on a plane in the middle of the night? They got on their plane in the middle of the night because this was August 1. It's the first day that the Air Force is separating from the Army in history. And so they want to get back because they're going to go celebrate in San Diego Air Force Day. It's a big deal for them. So they're willing to get on a plane at 2 a.m. and get down for this celebration. And so they get on the plane, but you have to manifest everything you put on it. They picked up a couple hitchhikers, two guys that needed a ride. So there's 4 people on the plane. And they write down. And so they write on the manifest, top secret cargo. So the only thing they have is the slag, and they manifest that as top secret cargo, put it in what's called the navigator's kit, and they take off.
Yes.
And this is the part of the story that is tragic and I think unique in UFO history. Plane makes it 45 minutes approximately into the flight. It spontaneously catches fire.
Yeah.
Left engine goes up. The two pilots, Davidson and Brown, are truly heroic. They get parachutes on their 2 passengers and get them out of the plane.
Yeah.
But the time it takes to get them out of the plane is too much time. And they cannot get parachutes on while the plane is still stable and get out. The left wing falls off, the plane augers in, and they perish in the crash just east in the heavy forested land east of Kelso, Washington. And as Scott said, because August 1 is Air Force Day, Captain Davidson and Lieutenant Brown are the first 2 casualties in the history of the United States Air Force.
That's
died in the line of duty. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
really
a dubious honor. I wouldn't want that.
It's a very, very, very tragic honor. Yes.
But
it is.
The fact that they had the hitchhikers in the first place, and the fact that they got them taken care of, that was just such a strange thing. They perished because those hitchhikers were there, although those hitchhikers could have been the reason for the spontaneous combustion. It's just really a very weird thing.
Yeah.
Well, there's even another theory that the plane was shot down.
I've heard that.
The Tacoma Tribune, the local paper in Tacoma, did have a front page headline that the plane was shot down by a 20 millimeter cannon. They had received a phone tip on that, and they ran with it. So very sensational, peacetime crash like this. And
very mysterious.
Even the crash site, even the information from the Army, who what happened was the plane crashes, and once that's realized, they fly a platoon down from McCord, and they seal off the site. They don't let locals near the site. No local law enforcement.
Including,
they seal it off.
Yeah, local police, right.
Then they bring in a new intelligence officer who goes to the site, investigates at the site, and is able to recover, and this is in the Army's final mission report, recovers the top secret cargo. That literally is written in the final mission report. They go in, they find the secret stuff. That is the last time we hear about the top secret cargo. There is no other record that we have found about what happened to it, where it went, and what it was. It was only that we know it was recovered by another intel officer. Once it was recovered, they released the site to local law enforcement. Yeah.
And, that just really, there's so much wrong with that.
I always say
so
that top secret cargo is it's right next to Indiana Jones' Ark of the Covenant in that warehouse in
the warehouse.
Right.
And that's something that people don't realize. There's just so much that there's just, oh my gosh, there's just so much. People don't realize that just because the government says, "Hey, I'm here to help," yeah, no. That just is not generally a good thing, really. I'm your government and I'm here to help is never going to help you.
We have one, I will say this though, one thing about this story, and it's complex, we have one really good government employee. I mean, the true hero in this story, I think Scott would agree, is the FBI field agent who was assigned to investigate a peacetime air crash of a B-25 bomber. And so that kind of launches the next segment of our story, which is the FBI's investigation, actually led by J. Edgar Hoover himself, who is actively involved in this investigation.
Well,
and go ahead.
I never thought that was a good thing either. I'm just putting that out there. I mean, it is what it is. But
he was worried about this being an enemy, that the whole UFO thing was the Soviet Union, and so it was a national security issue.
And it absolutely was. And that lighthearted kidding around, whatever aside, it really was a tremendous thing. But we really need to take our top of the hour break. I know we're all out of sync, people. I apologize. But don't you think this was worth the wait? I do. So we are going to go and do that, gentlemen, and then we will be right back. So for everyone listening, I'm quoting Mark some more. Don't touch that dial. We will be right back after this. Y'all come back too. And thanks for listening.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. In Brownsville, Texas, at least 7 people are dead. Several others are injured after a driver crashed his vehicle into a crowd waiting at a bus stop outside a migrant shelter this morning. Brownsville Police Lieutenant Martin Sandoval.
This is a mixture of people. We don't know if all of them were immigrants or not, but we can confirm that there were some immigrants within the deceased and the injured.
He says the driver is in custody and has been charged with reckless driving, but that more charges could come. Authorities are trying to determine whether the crash was intentional. Poland says one of its aircraft narrowly missed colliding with a Russian jet in international airspace over the Black Sea on Friday. Terry Schultz reports the Polish plane was carrying out European Union border policing responsibilities when, Poland says, the Russian warplane flew without warning into its path.
The Polish border guard says the near collision was due to a Russian fighter jet performing what it called aggressive and dangerous maneuvers just some 15 feet in front of the Polish plane. The Russian plane was flying with its transponders off, making communication impossible, the Polish border guard says in a statement. The close call caused the 3-person Polish crew to briefly lose control of their aircraft. After approaching the Polish jet 3 times, the Russian one flew away, the border guard reports. The Defense Ministry of Romania, whose territory was being covered at the time of the incident, says the Russian jet's behavior was completely unacceptable. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in Brussels.
Japan and South Korean leaders resumed reciprocal visits for the first time in 12 years. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports from Seoul the U.S. has pushed its 2 allies to put aside their long-running historical disputes.
Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's visit to Seoul comes less than 2 months after his South Korean counterpart, President Yoon Suk-yeol, visited Tokyo. Today, the 2 leaders agreed that the threat of North Korea's growing nuclear arsenal requires Seoul and Tokyo to cooperate more closely on security issues. To restore ties with Japan, Yoon made a big gamble and a big concession in March. He decided to compensate Korean victims of Japanese forced labor during World War II through a Korean foundation. Kishida has not offered any new official apologies for Japan's 1910 to 1945 colonial rule over Korea, but today he said at a press briefing that he felt heartbroken about the sad and painful things Koreans experienced at the time. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
Former President Donald Trump has rejected his last chance to testify at a civil trial where E. Jean Carroll, a longtime advice columnist, has accused him of raping her in 1996. Trump let a 5 p.m. deadline today pass without asking to testify. He hasn't shown up once during the 2-week Manhattan federal court trial, which resumes tomorrow. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. In Sudan, fighting continued today between the army and a paramilitary group. This as officials from both groups arrived in Saudi Arabia this weekend for talks. The U.S. and Saudi government sponsored the negotiations, urging them to come to a ceasefire, but both sides say they are only interested in talking about a humanitarian truce. New York's recently passed state budget includes $134 million to provide free school meals for students. Ava Pukach of member station WRVO reports 81% of the state's student population is now eligible for free breakfast and lunch.
New York State will reimburse schools participating in the federal community eligibility provision. Schools currently qualify if 40% of their students are eligible for free meals. The federal government said it would drop this threshold to 25%. Democratic State Senator John Mannion says it's the state budget's most consequential achievement.
And it removes some of the stigma that is involved when we're talking about students in a school setting that are hungry and may not have the funds necessary to purchase breakfast or lunch on that day.
The federal government funded universal free meals during the COVID-19 pandemic, but that program expired last year. For NPR News, I'm Ava Pukach in Syracuse.
Asia markets are trading in mixed territory at this hour. The Asia Dow is up about 0.7%, but the Nikkei, the main market in Japan, is down nearly 0.4%. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
You are the public in public media. Your support, whether you donate to your local station or sign up for a program like NPR Plus, makes it possible for us to uphold the values of journalism no matter what. If you haven't already, check out the NPR Plus version of podcasts like this one and get more from the shows you love. Learn more at plus.npr.org.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. We are back. Thank y'all so much for being here. I am Kat Hobson. You are listening to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. And if you have not been getting your magazine on a regular basis, or heaven forbid your subscription has lapsed, you can do online. We have had a tragedy befall us, but it's getting better every day, and that is that Phyllis Galdi suffered a stroke. It was a fairly serious one. I think they all are, but she is recovering. I will say that she has quite a good number of bills left. It was a large bleeding stroke, and so she has spent a good amount of time in the hospital, a good month or more in physical therapy at a rehab center, obviously still doing therapy at home. Very well loved, very well taken care of, but with a lot of bills. So the magazine is a little slow with being put out. However, the online editions are steady as they go. And I know that I enjoy my online subscription. But, go to fatemag.com. You can find trading cards if they're still there. You can find editions that are really great. The books, anything else that you would like to have. And if you are looking for an edition that is from the past, I got, for my birthday, a first edition Fate magazine. Talk about a girl who was in heaven. That would be me. I love it. And I love Phyllis. Like I said, there is a GoFundMe for her. It should be on my page. If it's not, it will be. I believe it is. But mainly energy, healing, prayers, those work too. But sometimes you have to be a pragmatist and just say, check that GoFundMe out. And if you got, a couple of bucks to toss in the kitty, that would be great. And I am so thrilled because this is one of her favorite things too. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here tonight with my guests. I am always fascinated when I get a chance to talk UFO history. And this is the one. This is it. I have Steve Edmiston with me, as well as Scott Schaefer. They have done all this research and put together a film, a documentary on the Maury Island Incident, which goes by that name. So I think that, yes, well, yeah, Scott is sporting his shirt. And while this says that I am recording, I really hope I am, because this is a great show. And it will be up on YouTube if everything is working according to plan, because you know what? We had a tough time getting started. That does not happen when we talk about ghosts, ever. Unless I'm in a haunted location and then it messes with my equipment. But it was worth it, guys. Don't you think, to be able to get this stuff out here and be cranking it up? I'm thrilled. So, and I interrupted you again.
Well,
it's what I do.
I want to say this. Thank you for sharing about Phyllis. I met Phyllis really last year about this same time.
Right.
I had reached out to see if Fate would support our festival that we'll probably talk about at the end of the talk today. And she was so helpful and so gracious and so open-minded and so willing to sort of say, you're doing this new thing. Of course we'll support you. Of course we'll do this. And it was just heartwarming. And so it was so sad when I heard that she'd had the stroke. And I've had some very significant health problems myself. I was happy to go to the GoFundMe and make a donation. And I'll just share this. As someone who's been in that spot, it's the breadth, not the depth of the support. So if you have $1, if you have $10, 1,000 people giving $10 is meaningful. It's beyond the money. That means people are paying attention. So I would join you in saying everyone should be encouraged to support if they can. Yes. So thanks for raising that. I appreciate it.
Well, she is Fate magazine.
Yeah.
She really is. And, it's her experience in this field of everything anomalous, from Cherokee little people to UFOs. UFOs are obviously a driving passion, because we're getting to where it cannot be denied. they've stopped trying. You know, even to the point of a general saying, although he said later he was kidding, that he thought there could be a mothership where all of these are coming from. Well, you know, he may have been kidding. He said it out loud and on mic in a press conference. So it's shifting. It's changing. There's acknowledgement happening. Of course, I always thought that Project Blue Book was disclosure. So, you know, yeah, we're done. There's about, 968 of these we can't explain, but there are no UFOs.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Exactly. I just love that.
Well, my theory is all it takes is one. All you need to do is prove that one of these is real.
Yes.
You don't need hundreds or thousands.
No, you do not. So.
And I think, you know, society is accelerating so fast now with Chat GPT and AI and all the warnings about that. And, you know, we just got out of the pandemic, and it seems like we're living in fast forward now. We're advancing so quickly. Yes. You know, you read about cures for cancer that you never heard before, and it's like, how can this be? How can these things be happening so quickly? So I think disclosure is coming soon.
I do too.
And I wonder what that will do to people.
I wonder what it will look like. Is it going to be something like, oh, look, there's this great big thing that's sitting on top of the White House where it was. I mean, you know, forget the front lawn, right? I mean, because these are not small craft that we're seeing. Not often. And if you can see them visibly from Earth, like from your deck, those are in our airspace. And, you know, I'm talking during the day. I've seen them. When we were in Scotland, almost every person had a photo that included one. It was weird, especially in the Highlands area. So, I mean, it's really an interesting thing to think about. What is it going to look like? Are they going to walk out of the White House after having some sort of summit and make a statement? I mean, who's going to make the statement?
Yeah, it's hard to say what it'll be. I think it'll be probably a more gentle disclosure, I would guess. They may admit that, you know, one case was, you know, with some kind of extraterrestrial, and that'll be enough just to say, you know, this was real, you know, and there's so many cases that are still unsolved.
Do you think the public would react in a responsible manner to that? Or do you think it's going to be havoc and jumping off buildings and things that people do when they're faced with things they're not used to? I mean, I always thought that War of the Worlds was a dress rehearsal, and we failed. And I think that's why we don't get information. So
I think we've been trained by COVID and the pandemic, and then now with AI and the acceleration of news, and it just seems like every day there's so much more. And I think our consumption of news through our phones and computers has increased, and everyone's so wired and connected now that I think I don't think it'll be that bad of a reaction. I think it'll just inspire a lot of introspection, and it'll probably overall it's probably going to be a good thing for the planet, for humans as a species, to realize that, you know, we're not alone. They've been here before, and maybe we can all get together over this issue. There's so much divisiveness, especially coming into an election year. So I think it'd be good.
That'd be nice to happen during an election year, right?
Yeah, I subscribe to the day the earth stood still,
yes.
you know, sort of view that is both positive and negative. I fear a negative response. I do fear that. But I also I'm optimistic about what's actually really happening, you know, sort of the whole actual interaction not being negative and hostile. I mean, the actual contact not being negative and hostile. It's just how we read That is,
yes.
Well, here's a good way that disclosure could happen is that a cure for a major disease or some kind of invention that changes how we communicate or how we travel is revealed, and they reveal that it came from alien technology. And they say, yes, we made a deal, or, here's the documents.
Yeah.
And so we've been working with them but the good news is, look over here. There's a shiny object. We've cured cancer.
I thought we already got that.
Attention to the man behind the curtain.
1947, we got Reynolds wrap, mass-produced.
That's right.
Oil.
Yeah.
That was from the aliens in 1947. That was the gift. They just didn't understand that wasn't as significant as curing cancer. They thought they were curing cancer.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the tinfoil to protect the head. So.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Oh my gosh. There's one segment of this that if with your blessing, I still want to share of the story.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all about y'all.
Oh, okay. If this is good, I'll segue, and then I'm kind of finish the story, and then we can talk about some of these other things like the movie and some of the other things that are really kind of fun to think about how they were done. So we've got this sighting in June of 1947, and we have the first Men in Black in June of 1947. We have the Summer of the Saucers. We have the tragedy investigating the Maury Island. We have the crash of the plane. And now it's sort of like enter in August of 1947. It's sort of enter FBI. If you're writing the screenplay, it's like now the FBI is on the scene. They had jurisdiction to investigate this cross-state travel of this military bomber that crashed. And the primary, there are a number of field agents assigned, but I always think of this as honestly a very good X-Files in 1947. Yes. You think of, in fact, the first X-File, but real. Because if you're a field agent in Tacoma, Washington for the FBI in 1947, you're as far from the power center as you could possibly be. It's the gulag.
Literally.
Right?
Yes.
And you get assigned a plane crash. You don't get the bank robberies and all the stuff that the other FBI, you get the plane crash with the alien slag, supposedly. That's your job. So you are Agent Mulder, and our Agent Mulder in this story is an FBI special agent named Jack Wilcox. Yeah. And we know a lot about Jack Wilcox because he was a very good writer, and his reports all the way, for all of August into September to J. Edgar Hoover, not to some other boss, directly to J. Edgar Hoover, and Hoover responded directly. Those are the spine of the movie that we wrote and produced. We relied on the FBI's interviews and records to make our story because we felt that would make it far more credible. Even if we don't know what happened, that part would be spot on credible. So the FBI, the plane crashes, and it takes about 5 days for the FBI's investigation to kick in. And Wilcox and several other agents are trying to gather information. And Harold Dahl has panicked. So the idea that he, once I want to make it go away, I'll say it's a hoax. He panics and he's like, I made it up. It's a hoax. I want to make it go away. This is now tragic. And I want to I don't want to be that guy. I'd rather be a guy who is accused of being a hoaxster than be, ridiculed for seeing something, right? And that was happening to him. So the FBI is investigating. They're interviewing him. They're interviewing Fred Chrisman. They're interviewing Smith and Arnold. And this is just giant investigation. And during the course of this, and this, I think Scott and I agree, we keep saying this might be the most important document in UFO history if you want to decide kind of which came first, and what's real. J. Edgar Hoover had been monitoring the investigation, learning the things that your viewers just learned tonight, right? And as he gets these teletypes, they are picking up Harold Dahl saying, I made it up, right? Because Harold Dahl's talking to the newspapers and injecting this idea that he made it up into the newspapers. So on August 14th, J. Edgar Hoover sends a teletype to his Agent Mulder, to Jack Wilcox. And he says, I'm reading everything that's going on. And it appears that this is a hoax and you can close the file.
Yeah.
And within 3 hours, and imagine this, you're a lowly field agent in Tacoma. You have no power. You are nothing. You are at the bottom of the rung. And you're communicating directly with no intervention to the director of the FBI at the height of his powers. Within 3 hours, Agent Wilcox sends a teletype to J. Edgar Hoover and says, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Harold Dahl never admitted that it was a hoax. He always held to his story. He just said, now I'm going to say it's a hoax because I want it to go away. So Dahl, Dahl did not admit, as the quote we keep saying. It's right from the teletype. Dahl did not admit it was a hoax. And the director of the FBI is corrected, which I think is a bold move. Tell the FBI. It was a bold move. Well, right?
I mean,
I think
we all know about J. Edgar, right?
Oh, yeah. We know he had a lot of issues. He had a lot of issues. And apparently UFOs were one of the things he was interested in, apparently. Wilcox is a hero we believe. I mean, that kind of truth-telling to power.
Well, I mean, he had the stones to do it. Because he would have been on his ear in any other circumstance.
So we have two huge memos from Wilcox to Hoover, both in September, both reporting all of the investigation and both making it very clear on multiple occasions that this was not a hoax, that this was that Harold Dahl always stuck to his story, but had introduced this hoax to make it go away. Well, that was okay with the FBI. In other words, they were fine. Even if they knew the truth, they would be happy to have it dismissed as a hoax. And so that's how they sealed the file. And for 50 years, nobody ever saw all the memos back and forth between the field agents and the director of the FBI because they were sealed. So it wasn't until 1997, if you would even have remembered to ask, that most people would ever have heard of Maury Island. Why? Because it was dismissed as a hoax. Yeah. And once you dismiss something as a hoax, why would we talk about it?
Exactly.
We just wouldn't. It's gone. It's buried. So that's why Scott and I just couldn't let it go. We're like, wait a minute. Everything we think we know about this story is wrong, not, and easy to prove that it's wrong. Yeah. I mean, we have all of the FBI's records proving that it's wrong. Now, we can argue about what did Harold see.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
All right. So all of the documentation that you got, the memos, the flight records, the other things that you were able to get your hands on, did you have to go through FOIA?
Yes and no. So that's a great question. You can, you probably know this. The number one category of documents requested of the federal government is UFOs, right? So if you say, what's the most, so what happened was sometime back, agencies created a selection of documents that they just say, we get asked so many times, here's everything we have. They call it the vault, right? So that is available and easily accessible. What we learned, though, and so we found things in the vault that we are using in the vault. What we learned, though, is that the vault is not complete, right? And you have to be cleverer than the government to get documents that you want. Because if you say UFO, you just go to the vault. Yeah. They just say go to the vault. So, for example, we went to the Army and we said nothing about UFOs, nothing about anything other than we would like information about the crash of a B-25 bomber. Went to the Army, Air Force. We want information about the crash of a B-25 bomber in, August 1st of 1947. Didn't mention anything about the story, just a plane crash. And we didn't get a response for 6 months, didn't hear a thing. I had forgotten about the request.
Oh my.
I get a call and gosh, Kat, I think, small world, I think the place is in Alabama. There is one of the archives for the Army. We got a call and it's this guy on the phone says, I'm so-and-so, I'm the archivist and I've got your request here. And I don't think we have anything, really. We don't have much. All I have is 67 pages of the final mission report of the plane crash. I'm like, what?
That'll do.
What? what? Things that they're not in the vault. They're not anywhere else. I've never seen anybody else have them. So, a month later, we get the 67-page final mission report from the Army, and we hadn't seen that before, and I'm not sure anybody'd seen it before. And so that was super useful because that's what allowed us to piece together what happened at the crash site.
Yeah.
And
that was clever.
That was super fast. So that's what we learned we have to do to get the records on this. Is you have to come at it from different angles.
Yes, act like a journalist or a historian, and just make it about the hard facts of the incident. Don't inject anything that could be dismissed.
Well, I always laugh and say that. Well, I kind of tongue-in-cheek laugh that with the conversion from UFO to UAP, 20 years from now, if it takes that long, no one's going to know that the change in the nomenclature is going to eliminate information as they're doing research. Kids that don't know, who aren't being taught how to do research appropriately, are not going to realize that they're going to not be able to use, an identified aerial phenomenon to get the results from Roswell or from Trinity or from, anywhere. I mean, anywhere. Maury Island would, that file would disappear. All of them will be not something that 20 years from now someone will actually think to look for. Unless they're truly dedicated.
It's up to you, Kat, to make sure that the future generations know that the difference and the similarity between UFOs and UAPs. And, I think by then it'll all be AI. We won't have to work anymore, so AI will do all the work.
We'll have all the time. So
that's right. So
us and our Soma, yes, indeed. So, which is basically, people laugh when I say that, but I mean, I think that's what electronics are, basically, just a different form. But people, if you don't know what I'm talking about, read 1984. It is not an operations manual. It's really a good book. So, it was never meant to be the way it is. But anyway, I digress. But, it really is something to think about. 20 years from now, could you have gone in and said, I would like to go into the black vault, please? Well, sure. About what topic? UAPs? Oh, we've got stuff that started in, 2014 maybe?
Yeah.
Sure. We've got stuff for you. Done deal.
I think disclosure will likely happen before then, so I don't think
I hope so.
we have to worry about researching. I think it'll all just be out in the open.
Right out in the face.
And maybe we'll all have alien friends by then.
Some of us do.
Why not?
I know people
that's
that
great.
feel that they do. I mean, I have Al.
Well, I've heard.
So
when I worked on sightings, there were stories about, I think there were 7 different alien races, and there was one, I think they were the Nordics that enjoyed to go into Las Vegas, and they had a secret casino they would go gamble in, and just crazy stories like that.
Did you actually have to dress like that to go in there?
I don't know. I wasn't involved, or so I say.
That would be fun to know. Well, something that really struck me, and I've been doing Fate Radio for 5 years, I guess. And it's really interesting to me that little things that you don't know about different people's experiences. I did not know that Travis Walton felt that, his experience actually saved his life. That, when he ran out behind that craft, that the wash was so toxic that they rescued him. Basically, they didn't want to leave a dead human with witnesses, right? So they just took.
Well, speaking of, I have a small world alert. I actually, when I worked on sightings, I went and interviewed Travis Walton in Arizona, and we went in a snowcat. It must have been a 3-hour or 4-hour drive in this huge and it was snowing where they went, where they had the sighting with the experience. And I was with Travis and I think two other of his friends who were there. And I watched them carefully as we got closer. They started acting differently and they were becoming emotional because they started feeling that, oh my God, we're almost back here. We haven't, some of them hadn't been there since the incident or whatever. And so that was a fascinating story. I'm still not sure what the truth of Travis Walton's experience was.
Well, there is one of the people that were with him lives here. And I was actually on my way to do a paranormal investigation that I was a guest on. I wasn't who put it together. So I had, I was just going. And I got a message from someone that says, I like doing that. And I would like to, go too. And I'm like, I don't know you. And it's not my investigation. And so he had all this fire in the sky stuff on his Facebook page. And I was like, that's, I find that rude. I didn't know that he was a friend. So I messaged Travis and I was like, do you know this person? Because weird. But it was really one of them. And, I think I hurt his feelings, but I didn't. I mean, it just came out of the blue, but I didn't realize that they weren't all still there. I think some of them just kind of ran from that because it was so alarming. I can't imagine, if it was true, I can't imagine what they felt like.
Well, they felt that they left their friend behind. I think they all left.
Well,
and so they thought that he was dead. They thought he was dead, I'm sure. And then 4 or 5 days, I think, later, he walks into town.
Yeah. Well, he was naked at a phone booth.
Right.
I mean, he got dumped at a phone booth and buck naked. So.
Yeah, if that's a hoax, good job with the being naked part. That's
and your clothes not being able to be found. I mean, that's that was an interesting conversation. I haven't interviewed him, but I have chatted with him, and I was fascinated. So
yeah, as a journalist, I must say that my interview with him was interesting because he got so emotional and he got choked up many times, and I thought, well, boy, why would he get choked up if it's all a hoax? And I thought, well, either maybe he's a good actor, but his friends were doing the same thing. No,
I mean, I don't think he would know how to be a good actor. I think that his emotion, because he's so reticent for the most part, and when he does start to talk about that, it's almost a visceral reaction. So, anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. I went off.
It's okay. No, I love these stories.
Took that left turn at Albuquerque, right?
Well, maybe this is a great time because we've been hearing a little bit from Scott to hand it off. I mean, one of the things is I think that there's a challenge that we have when we experience something that is unusual. And maybe, so unusual that it's ridiculed or dismissed. And I think that was one of the really important things that we wanted to explore when we made a movie about the Maury Island incident. And Scott, if you want, talk a little bit about from your perspective, making the movie and what you chose. How did you kind of choose what to emphasize, from that crappy script that I wrote?
It was a great script. See, it always helps to start with a great script, and Steve wrote a tremendous one. And he dove so deep into those FBI, the declassified documents. He's got a binder about that thick.
Oh wow!
And so he did his homework, and it was really well done. And so starting with the source material from the FBI, and making that the spine of the story, everything can go back to these testimonials and interviews and Hoover and Wilcox. And so using, what we can only consider, I guess, as historians, as the facts of the time and how they were documented, really made it easy to do. And so starting with that, and then, as a director, I always believe that steal from your inspirations, your role models. So some of my role models included Stanley Kubrick and David Lynch, and so
Very good.
we did the scene with they were very different directors, and so the scene with the Men in Black in our film, they're in a cafeteria and they're talking. So it's the Man in Black and Harold Dahl across from each other at a table, and Man in Black is telling Dahl what he saw and really intimidating him. And I thought it would be, it's a great way to think about creating art is what would David Lynch do is what I thought for this scene. So I thought David Lynch would really, slowly ratchet things up, and then he would add something unusual maybe in the background. And so we did a lot of homework on, culturally what was popular in 1947. Well, there was a Disney film called Song of the South, which you will never see again.
Nope.
It's been put back in the vault for a variety of good reasons.
Different vault.
Different vault.
Different
yes.
vault. Yes.
A Disney vault in Burbank. I think it's locked. So there was a song in that film that was very popular on the radio during the summer of 1947. Zippity Doo Dah was the name of the song. So we had a character that worked in the cafeteria who happened to be one of our producers, Danny House, turn a radio on in the background, and we had that song come on an old 1940s radio, and it played as the Man in Black was putting the hammer down. So to hear this, happy song, zippity doo dah, going on in the background as the Man in Black is, really intimidating Harold Dahl, and we're doing these slow, Kubrick move into the face, intercutting between them. Is really, I'm really proud of that scene. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. And so that to me is the highlight of the film, to me, is that scene.
Yes.
And so we had great actors also. Alan Fitzpatrick played the Man in Black. Tony Dupé was Harold Dahl. And David Hogan was our Agent Wilcox. And then John Patrick Lowry did a great J. Edgar Hoover. So it helps to have great people involved. And
it does.
And it was a lot of fun. We shot over 4 days, and we didn't know we'd be talking about it 10 years later.
You did that in 4 days?
For crying out loud.
Yeah.
Well, 4 days of shooting, yeah.
Really?
It's a 30-minute film, so, we only needed
that's pretty great.
4 locations.
Yeah.
It was quite an experience. We're both, we both done a lot of filmmaking, so we kind of know our way around it, but it was an aggressive schedule, and it was a great crew. And our hope, our intent, you've seen it. And if your viewers haven't seen it, you go to MauryIslandIncident.com and you can find it. Right. So, but, the intent was we wanted people we didn't want to do something that just felt like a cheesy, low budget thing. We wanted people to look at it and go, wait a minute, I feel like I'm seeing something that is of a quality I would expect in a theater. I mean, just the production values and everything, and just really feel, an amazing musical score from a composer. We just felt like we wanted to deliver, even if it was a 30-minute film, we wanted to just have people at the end of it go, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know this story. This is such an interesting story. And then we wanted them to ask, is this true? Or how much is true? Just that creating that sense of curiosity in the viewer where they just want more. And I think Scott, as a director, really made that happen. I can write a story, but the director brings it to life.
Thank you.
It was a fun collaboration. And we
had a lot
of sharing it. We do a lot of public speaking where we talk about the story, show the 30-minute film. And by the time we talk about the story and show the film, the audience is usually pretty on fire.
Right.
They're, they're like, I got questions. And it's really fun. It's really fun to do that.
And now we're ready to make a sequel. We want to show the Winthrop interrogation, the plane crash.
I would love that.
There's so much more to present.
There is. And I was doing a little on my own. Did Harold Dahl really just completely disappear? Other than tax records here and there?
No, we've learned a little bit about the Dahl family since making the film. Sort of originally it was really hard to get any information, but we have, through
we met his daughter,
granddaughter, great grandniece. We've made some connections in the family. The most fascinating. This is a fascinating, this is probably the first program we've done that has a larger, audience that goes beyond the Pacific Northwest. We actually discovered one of the things that people get, you know how it is, Kat. People get riled up, and if they decide they're contrarian, they want to just sort of discredit you. They want to just attack. Oh, that's not true. And one of the things that people say is, if Harold Dahl's son's arm got burned, there would be a record of that. There would be a way to prove that. Yeah, people just get. And what was fascinating, we learned just last year from a relative of the Dahl family, and it's a complicated family. Everybody in the family knew about Charles' arm, that was common knowledge, that his arm had been burned. They didn't think that much of it, like it was just the thing that happened. But that was the first time, Scott, I think, that we had ever had corroboration from people that said, oh no, this was a thing that we knew about, right? That this was, because people will say, well, there must be a hospital record. If you can't produce a hospital record, this was all.
That's huge, because people didn't go to the hospital then. I mean,
a huge piece of testimonial evidence that the family it was common knowledge, and we were thrilled to sort of. And so what happens is every like a lot of good stories, you get a little bit more. Every year, you seem like you get one little piece of the puzzle just keeps coming in, and we really enjoy that. And we'd like to make another film. That would be fun. The other thing about making the movie that has been great and getting excited about the story is changing the narrative a little bit as far as UFO history goes, because 10 years ago, for sure, UFO history started with Roswell.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing you would ever hear about was Roswell. That's it. Ken Arnold's sighting before Roswell, little bit of knowledge. Maury Island, zero knowledge. I mean, if you put a bar graph together.
Yeah, hoax. Maury Island hoax.
And that's, and to us, that's wrong. We're not trying to denigrate Roswell or anything, but we're just saying, the history is more interesting. It's much fuller. So why would we ignore something when we now know that it's important? Let's let the facts go where they go. Equally important and need to be investigated.
Well, I do need to let people know that they are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama, and to run a little quick break. So this is quick. We'll be right back with y'all, and thanks for listening. See you on the flip side.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM, Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk. Only on Paranormal Experienced Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back for the final segment of Fate Magazine Radio. I am so glad you are here, and I hope that you have had nearly as much fun as I have, because this has been a topic that I knew about, I loved. I had no idea of the intricacy, and to be honest, I didn't know that it was 3 days pre Kenneth Arnold. And you know, I think a lot of that has to do with Arnold's self-promotion, trying to get all this stuff done, and the acknowledgement and reward, I guess, for bringing a story like this to the front when, you know, he knew that this had happened because it wasn't a secret, right?
Yeah, Ken Arnold to us, I think, is a complicated character.
He is.
We've kind of come full circle in a way in terms of our appreciation of him, because he did, when he wrote his book in 1952, The Coming of the Saucers, he spent a lot of time talking about the Maury Island. He didn't try to hide the Maury Island incident. He talked a lot about investigating it, and a lot of the detail that we have comes from his book. So we are appreciative, in hindsight, we're actually pretty appreciative of that record that he created. Interestingly enough, we didn't use that book for the movie. Right. We felt it was a good idea to go to the FBI's records and use those instead. But it's certainly corroborated by Arnold has a lot of detail that's really interesting about that. So we've kind of, and then, you know, my sense of Ken Arnold is that, you know, that he also suffered from the slings and arrows that people that saw something, you know, it was a long life that was, I think, ended up being really frustrating for him, that he was, you know, starts off as this credible, famous celebrity guy, but as time passed, he felt like he was being discredited and marginalized. And I think he was very, very frustrated by that. So I feel I've kind of come around to this point of really sympathy toward his whole life. And, you know, now where we are, and of course we all as humans want to just be positive and future thinking and everything. And I'm just deeply appreciative of, I even have my own copy, you know, of the, right, you know, of the Saucers, one of the older versions. I know it just came out again. But you know, I think it's emblematic of people who, certainly at that time when the government was hostile towards people who were talking about, you had Project Sign and Project Grudge and actual programs in the government to discredit people for saying they saw things. When the government has a program to discredit you, that's pretty tough.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people are reticent now about coming forward. And, you know, which is sad because there's so much more. I think there's so much more activity. I mean, our skies are not as clear. I would have loved to be outside, you know, on a dark moon night and just sit outside and watch. I live in a city. It's tough to do. But, you know, it's still, I think there was still a taboo because people were very quick to judge mental health, although they tolerated it better, I think, back then because, you know, that's just Bob, you know. But well,
I think that the fact that the Pentagon is involved now and that they've changed it to UAPs and they're having hearings. There was just one, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Another one coming up.
And then, of course, with the footage from the military jets and the Navy pilots, and there's a lot of, I think, newfound credibility that's being exposed. And I think that if the Pentagon is having hearings and they're saying there are X number of unsolved sightings, and then they're releasing footage with these orbs. There's one over the Middle East.
Yes.
And I think we're getting closer to something big happening. The disclosure.
And it makes me wonder what it's going to be a distraction from sometimes too. Because, I think that, well, hey, what can I say? Conspiracy is part of what I get with this job, right? But I do think that it's those videos, by the time we saw them, were over a decade old. And so the release of the information would not have happened, I think, without some
journalists.
Well, journalists, yes, but they had to have sources motivation. Willing to share that at possible peril. And, the people that are doing that work, including y'all, are so very, I think you're very brave. I mean, I know that this is something that is public record because y'all went to the public record, so you can't be impeached, right? But I do think that this field that you've chosen can sometimes be a little dramatic. Mm-hmm. No pun intended. The other field, the UFO field.
Yeah.
But
I think you raise a really good point. And another way of thinking about it too is at that point is, I think sometimes in government, in politics, people will release information so that is the bright, shiny object, so they don't have to talk about something else. And we even play with that theme, and I mean play in the sense of, artistic discretion. We play with that theme in our Maury Island film, with an interview between an actual meeting, hypothetical meeting between J. Edgar Hoover and this field agent, Jack Wilcox, where Roswell is discussed at the end of the summer. Roswell is discussed, and there's this sort of hint that, well, if these things happened in the Northwest, maybe we don't want people knowing about that. So let's let people get excited about this thing down here. The bright, shiny object is Roswell. And we had a lot of fun with that idea. It's less about, is that what happened? Because we have, it's more about, that's how it works. The that's what disinformation is. It's like, I'll give you this so you don't look at that. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. And that was the point I think we wanted to make in the film is, what were we, they sealed these records.
Yes.
They didn't tell people that Harold Dahl never admitted that it was a hoax. And so thinking about those things is important to think about.
Well, it is. But it doesn't take away from the reality of the situation, right? I mean, it's still an incredible history, but especially with, the advancement in technology in your work, especially Scott. I mean, the possibilities are endless for what can be created or hidden. I mean,
right.
That's what fantasies are made of, right?
Yeah, and we're at the birth. This is like, I think the head of Google compared AI. The current state of AI with the invention of fire. It's like, are you kidding me? The invention of fire? That's a major statement.
Fire is overrated. Fire is overrated. It's overrated.
It's highly overrated. So,
I mean, I would put fire above. Fire is above the wheel. So it is. AI is what, number 2? There's fire and AI.
Don't take my wheels.
Blows
don't
my
take
mind.
my wheels out of there.
Yeah, don't take your wheels away. So.
I think a thing to also to talk about, and obviously this ends up being, I guess, a plug, but I think Scott and I have always tried to figure out how do we, if we want to correct the historic record, which is really part of what we wanted to do with Maury Island, is to really correct the record. How do we do it? And so the movie was one way, and I think, as you know, the other thing that we've been doing much more recently is community events here in the Northwest. As we launched for 10 years, we did, and we still do, something called Burning Saucer, which is a celebration of this event. It's a private event. That's kind of a challenge because it's private, kind of gets maxed out. And we've been featured in all kinds of things, because it's newsworthy, I guess. You can look it up, so. Google burning saucer. But it was so popular, we now have a public event. And that's interesting because it's sort of trying to correct their historic record in a fun way.
Yes.
And I think that's the way to do it. I think that can be, as opposed to like hammering on people and saying, it's like, bring them along and go, look at, so we have this thing called the Men in Black. It's the Men in Black Birthday Bash. And we launched it last year and it's growing this year to 4 days, a long weekend. And it's like a lot of community festivals, right? But it's all cosplay. So it's like on the opening night party, everybody's in black and white. And
that
it's
is so
out
fun.
Puget Sound, right on the shores of Puget Sound, looking at Maury Island. And it's just a wonderful event. And then we have a film festival, and then we have a music festival. But the idea is that it's super fun, right? We're having a great time, but it's celebrating the historic record, both the history and the mythology. And it's been really fun to see how people respond to that. Like that's a great experiment, right? It's a great experiment. Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. So if people want to know about it, you can Google burning saucer. That's the party you can't go to, but MIBFET, Men in Black Birthday Bash, is MIB 622, the date of the first Men in Black. MIB 622, meninblack.com.
And so I want to just throw an idea to Kat. You said you knew a man in black. You've got to get that person to next year's event. That should be your guest of honor.
We should do an annual featured Men in Black interview.
Yes.
That would be fun. That would be fun. And I'm going to tell you that I may have the opportunity to see him over the summer. And if I do that, then I will certainly bring that up because, I mean, he doesn't care. he
that's great. See,
that's right. He talks about it at events.
That would be
so
we would be celebrating him and his role, and he could be anonymous. We could, put him in
he won't care.
A shroud, a silhouette, but care. Yes, it's great. That'd be awesome.
I've seen him at a very scientific conference, not necessarily a UFO conference. So it's, but I've seen him at both, really. So he'd probably be cool with that. I'll see if I can get y'all in touch.
I can only imagine, 150 or more men and women in black in an audience, and him and people on the stage, and we do. And Scott and I are both professional interviewers. I'm a lawyer; he's a journalist. And when we do Burning Saucer, we've always done. We've had rocket scientists. We have all kinds of people, and they come to these events, and we do programs, and it's really fun to learn from them. But that's a great idea.
Live, I think it is too. Brilliant.
Can you imagine?
I think it would be
a special guest speaker, a real man in black. I just can't imagine the stories he could share.
With a very impressive rank that he retired with, so it would be very cool. So
it would be.
He's cool. He's probably one of the coolest people that I've met that was in his position. So a lot of fun.
What a cool job.
Well, I mean, that wasn't all he did, but it was what he did then. So very cool guy.
The concept of the Men in Black is so pervasive. When we do our talk and we have our PowerPoint, we have all the imagery and everything up there. Right. One of the things that we do is we kind of try to explain to people. So if Harold Dahl, on June 22nd, 1947, Harold Dahl is approached by a Men in Black, first time in history. Yeah. What did that scene, what did that encounter lead to? What's the legacy? And if it is the franchise, if it is the X-Files, if it is all that stuff, what does it really mean? So if you take the Men in Black franchise alone, just those films, that is a franchise that is, let's see, $2 billion in ticket sales. So the box office ticket sales for that franchise, $2 billion, that actually equates to ticket prices. Like if you were, instead of buying tickets, you were buying a book. That's about 200 million books.
Yeah.
Right. That would make it the third largest selling title, the Men in Black, in history, behind the Bible and the Quran. I mean, that's how pervasive Men in Black is in pop culture.
That's astounding.
I mean, think of it. So you got to continue, so you're like, wow. So it's the Bible, the Quran, and then essentially tickets to the Men in Black friend. That's stunning to me.
That is stunning.
How pervasive it is. And that story is from that June 22nd, 1947. I just find that wonderful and
mind-blowing,
exciting, and something.
It's mind-blowing.
That's a legacy. That is a legacy, right? Yeah. That is a legacy. Fascinating.
And our goal now is to meet the real Man in Black. I'm really excited about.
I can help you with that, maybe.
That's such a great thing. All right,
or at least help you reach out to him. So
great.
But well, we are so over time, considering that we got started so late. You know what? It has been so much fun. I have loved every minute of this. And I appreciate y'all, because you know what? If y'all had given up, then this information wouldn't be out there. And I just think that it's an honor to have y'all, because y'all went back and y'all didn't rewrite history. You released history.
Thank you.
That is a cool thing.
It was great talking to you, Kat. You're a great interview. You're easy to talk to.
Thank you. Y'all are too. So, I've enjoyed every minute of this. So I do need to let our listeners know that, and viewers tonight, because this is going up, but I appreciate all of y'all being here too. I have had so much fun bringing you this information, but we are at the end of this, and I just have to make sure that you know that I appreciate you. And I know that sometimes, especially, the last little bit, life can be tough. There's things that happen. There's things that, the media won't let go of. And it's always, look at this. And you can change that. You can change the world that you live in. All you have to do is just you. Just do you. And if you don't like what you're looking at, just alter your behavior. Be the person that you would like to have for a friend. If something seems like it is just too much for you, then that's okay too. You can just change it. Smile at people. We're not wearing masks, but even if you need to, your eyes can still do that. If somebody needs a hand, give it. If you need a hand, let someone know. And if you feel like you don't have a friend, I'm sure you do. Nobody is walking this path completely alone, even though sometimes we feel like it. I read that loneliness is the most pervasive emotion right now in people. And don't be. Everybody has value. You have value. You go out and you manifest that change. Be the change you want to see. And if you need something to help you with that, there's a really great song on YouTube by a guy named Corey Smith, and it is called Be the Change. He wrote it for a group in Africa. It's one of the best songs I've ever heard, but you can only find it on YouTube. And because he did it for a fundraiser. So anyway, you do that, you be you, enjoy your weekend, what's left of it, like 4 hours, but have a great week too. Thanks again. Good night.